In this video, you will learn everything you need to know about HTML so that you can start creating your own websites right away. You do not need any programming experience to understand the contents of this video. Why should you learn HTML? HTML is the first language you need to master on your journey to become a web developer. It is used to define which elements should be on your website. If you want to style and design the website, you have to learn CSS. And if you want your website to react to user interactions, you will have to learn JavaScript. In simple words, HTML is the skeleton of the website, CSS the skin, and JavaScript the brain. So if you want to learn how to create websites, HTML is where you start. So let's jump right into it. To write HTML code, you only need two things: a browser and a text editor. In this tutorial, I will be using Visual Studio Code, or just VS Code, as my text editor. To download the editor, you can go to code.visualstudio.com. It is free and available on all operating systems. The first step when starting a web project is to create a new folder where you will keep all the important files for the website. You can name this folder whatever you want. For example, HTML tutorial. Now let's open the code editor Visual Studio Code. In VS Code, we will open the folder that we just created. File, Open Folder, HTML tutorial. Once you open the folder, it will appear in the sidebar on the left. So, let's create our first HTML file. Click this icon to create a new file. We call this file index.html. It is very important that the file extension is .html. This index.html file is a website. If you write anything in here, for example, hello world, it will appear on the website. Let's save the file and open this website by right-clicking the index.html file and then copy path. Now open your browser and paste the path. As we can see, it will open this website that says hello world. This website is of course not on the internet yet. If we look up here, we can see a location on my computer and not a website path. Now let's write some HTML code to add some elements to this website. Since HTML is text-based, you can simply write text in order to display it on the website. If you want to add some elements like images, buttons, heading and so on, you need tags. To write tags, you need pointed brackets, the greater than and smaller than characters. Here's an example of how a button is created in HTML. You start with the opening tag, which is basically just the word button written inside pointed brackets. Then you write the content of your HTML element, in this case what is to be displayed inside the button. After that, you write the closing tag. It's basically just like the opening tag, but with a slash symbol. So let's try that out in Visual Studio Code. You write smaller than, button greater than. As we can see, Visual Studio Code automatically added the closing tag, which is great because it saves us time. Now we just have to define the content of the button, meaning what text should be displayed on the button. If we save the file with Ctrl S and reload the page in the browser, we can see our new button. This is how you create HTML elements. Here you can see a list of HTML tags that you can use. For example, if you want to have a headline, you need the h1 tag. For example, opening h1 tag, welcome to my website, closing h1 tag. This heading will then appear on the website. As we can see, headings are bigger than normal text. The h1 tag is the main heading. It is the most important heading on your website. When you write text, let's say a blog article, you will be using subheadings as well. Subheadings are created with the h2 tag. The h2 heading is smaller than the h1 heading. Of course, there's also h3, h4 and h5. They become smaller and smaller as the number increases. In HTML, there are also elements that do not require a closing tag, the so-called self-closing tags. These are elements that don't have content. for example, the input tag. So I just write the opening input tag. Notice we don't have any content and no closing HTML tag. An input element is an area where the user can enter text. In HTML, there are two main things that we have to understand: tags and attributes. You already learned that tags are used to create elements. Attributes are additional values that change the behavior of the element. An attribute is created in the opening tag right before the greater than character. For example, I can write type equals and in quotation marks number. The input element is now meant explicitly for numbers. Let's save the file and reload the page in the browser. Since this input element is only for numbers, we cannot enter text. If you try to enter text, it will not work. You can only add numbers. On the right side, there are also these small arrows that increase and decrease the number. So this is how attributes work. They change the behavior of the element. HTML elements can also have several attributes. Just hit spacebar and add another attribute. For example, the placeholder. Placeholder is a hint for an input element that tells the user the purpose of this element. For example, enter your age. Now the user knows what to enter. If you want to create an entire website in HTML and not just random elements as we have done so far, then first you need to understand the basic HTML structure of a website. Every HTML document starts with the same basic code. So let's remove everything we have written so far. The basic HTML structure starts with the opening and closing HTML tag. This tag represents the root element of the HTML document. It is the container for all the other HTML elements, basically for the entire website. Our HTML consists of the head and the body. You can think of HTML as the skeleton of the website. Humans also have a head and a body. The head contains the settings of our website. The HTML tags that you write in here are not elements that appear on the website. Here you write the settings. For example, the title tag. The title is the name of this tab in your browser. Whatever I write in here will be displayed up here. The body contains all the elements that should appear on your website. Everything you write in here will be displayed on the website. For example, the H1 heading, Hello World. When you write the HTML code for your website, most of the time you will be working inside the body. So this is the basic HTML structure. It is so fundamental that Visual Studio Code has actually an implemented shortcut for that. So again, let's remove everything to generate the basic HTML structure with a shortcut. You only have to type the exclamation mark and hit enter. Now it will generate all this code. As we can see, it is a little bit more than before. The first line, doctype HTML, states that the type of this document is HTML. Next comes the HTML tag. As we can see, it has an attribute. The lang attribute sets the language to English. If your website is in another language, you would have to change this language attribute to whatever language you're using. In the HTML head, there are 3 new tags before the title tag. These are basic settings that you most likely do not want to change. They control, for example, the character set for the website. The UTF-8 character set is the most widely used character set. It contains the majority of alphabets based on the Latin script, like the English alphabet, for example. I suggest that you just leave those meta tags there. We can ignore them for now. Now let's talk about some useful HTML elements that you can use on your own website. Since we have covered all the HTML basics, all you need to learn now are the different HTML elements that you can use. We have already talked about headings, buttons, and input elements. Apart from that, there's also the anchor tag. In HTML, the A tag. It is used to create links to other websites. Inside the href attribute, you write the website path. For instance, https://www.youtube.com. The content of the anchor tag would be, hey there, this is a link to YouTube. This anchor element is actually very important when you create a big website with multiple sub-websites. In your project folder, you can create another HTML file for example, aboutus.html. Now generate the basic HTML structure and the h1 heading About Us. This is now a sub-website. On the main website, index.html, you can create another anchor element and refer to the aboutus.html file inside the href attribute. This link will now take me to the About Us page. Another very important tag is the div tag. Div means division and is used to structure your HTML code. It is often just referred as container. This container has no effect on its content or layout until it is styled in CSS. So you will use it very often when you create the design of the website. In HTML, there are a lot of semantic tags, just like the div tag, that don't do anything in particular when being created in HTML, but they are important for the general structure of the website. These are the most common semantic tags. A section is an entire area of a website. A website usually has many sections, which are separated from each other by color, for example. The header is the head area of the website. It is usually the most interesting to look at and gives the users a general idea what to expect. The footer is the counterpart to the header. It is the last section of a website. It contains links like customer service, privacy policy, contact information, and so on. You may think that these semantic HTML elements are useless because they don't change anything in particular. But they are important once you style your website with CSS, and they are important for screen readers that read the website to blind people. Now let's talk about images. To add an image to your website, you use the img tag. It is a self-closing tag, so it has no content and no closing tag. Now you need to add an image to your project folder, meaning a file with the file extension .png or .jpeg and so on. This image file has to be in your project folder, because now you use the src attribute in the image tag and enter the name of the image file. In my case, brandenburgertor.jpg. Then the image should appear on the website. Now let's move on to lists. In HTML, there are ordered lists and unordered lists, OL and UL tag. To create a list item, you use the li tag. List items in unordered lists are displayed as bullet points. List items in ordered lists are numbered. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is used to structure the contents of a website. HTML is mainly about defining which elements should be on your website. To create HTML elements, you need to work with tags. Most elements consist of an opening tag, its content, and then a closing tag. However, there are elements that don't need any content or closing tag, the so-called self-closing tags. HTML elements can also be given attributes. These specify the element and are important for styling in CSS and for programming in JavaScript as well. Every website has a head and a body. All the settings are listed in the head. They will not be displayed on the website. Everything inside the body will be displayed. This is a list of elements that you can use on your own website. But as you may have noticed, HTML elements look very boring. It is all just black and white and gray. If you want your website to look pretty, you will have to learn CSS as well. CSS is used to design the website with colors, gradients, layouts, and all that. In future, there will be a lot of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript tutorials on this channel. These will help you on your journey to become a web developer. I hope this video has given you a good introduction into web development. If you want to see more from us, feel free to subscribe to the channel to see more videos just like this one. See you next time.